It's Wednesday, November 13th, and today is an exciting day. Adobe just released Muse 7.0. A lot of people are referring to it as the fall 2013 update, but the official number is 7.0. And with 7.0, they've added a few new things. Some things are small, some things are big. We've got the usual code enhancements, etc., etc. But there are 5 features that I consider pretty big that I want to talk about. And I'm going to talk about them in order from what I think is sort of least exciting to what I think is sort of most exciting. So let me switch over to Muse here. And one of these new features is on the Widgets library, where you'd normally find your slideshows and your other compositions. There's this new social folder. And these social things, they're like little buttons and things like that you can drag onto your canvas. And essentially, you're embedding HTML code without having to do the work of going and finding it and copying and pasting it. Like a Google map, you don't have to go to Google Maps anymore. You can just drop this right in there, and then you can type the address right in there. Now, what's really cool is these things are, they're not necessarily completely customizable from within Muse, but these are things that people are going to be able to develop and kind of distribute to the rest of the world. So this library can actually expand. These files are called MuCow files. They're .mucow files, and you're going to start seeing them floating around on the web, and you'll be able to download them and do all kinds of cool stuff. I think Adobe actually already put a few extra ones up on the Muse Exchange, so this is not the end of it, but they've thrown in some cool things here. You can embed PayPal and stuff like that just more easily than you could before. And also, we've got this cool new thing called a state button under compositions. There's this little guy here. You drag it on there. It's this ugly little thing, but essentially, it's sort of like a group, and whatever you put in this group will hover together. So if you hover over part of it, everything inside of it behaves as though you're hovering over it. And I have an example here of a state button. Here is an image, and it has that little green outline around it. Here is the buy now part of this button and the $8 part of this button. And you'll notice they all hover independently of one another, but you'd probably want them to respond together. If I hover over buy now, $8 should appear pressed down. They're really the same button, though they're two separate objects in Muse. So if I scroll down, I've got my state button version of this, and you can see that it all behaves together as one. When I hover over buy now, $8 goes down and appears pressed in, and the image above also gets highlighted. So that's what the state button is meant to accomplish. You can have one thing that you roll over with your cursor, and everything else within that state button responds. Pretty cool stuff. Something that I have wanted for quite a while. Next, we also have the Fullscreen Slideshow. So you can now create a slideshow that automatically fills the entire browser, even if I scale the browser or have a larger computer screen. This will fill the entire browser, which is really, really nice, and you can set up some navigation or not. You can also have this just kind of run as a browser fill. You can have it run in the background of your website, and that works out pretty nice. But we still, unfortunately, don't have that 100% width slideshow. You have to fill the entire browser still, unfortunately. But this is still a neat feature, and you can use it for all kinds of workarounds to avoid the need for that 100% width slideshow. Another pretty cool one. So the next thing after Fullscreen Slideshow, I mean, everyone's going to be highlighting different features of Adobe Muse, but they've added some things to the scroll effects here. And the scroll effects, I think, are a pretty cool and compelling reason to be using Muse. And one of the big ones that I think is big, because I've wanted this for a while, is you can now have shapes that are 100% page width that have a fill that fills the shape that also does the scroll motion effects. So for those of you who didn't get that, you've probably never tried to do it, or at least not yet. But in the past, you've had to fill boxes. You've had to if you wanted to use an image as a fill, you've had to set it to tile. You couldn't set that image to fill the width or scale to fit that shape. And now you can. You no longer have to tile the images that you put into a shape, like a rectangle here. So I have these 100% page width rectangles, and I'm able to fill them with images that scale to fill those rectangles, so they stay at the width of the browser like this. It's really nice. Wanted that for a good long while. And now another thing that you can do, here's an interesting example of that. You can use scroll position to control a slideshow, advancing from one slide to another. So in this case, this is a weird one, but it's one of my favorite ways to implement this. I've created a full screen slideshow. Behind the word scroll, there's a full screen slideshow. And my full screen slideshow is actually just filled with colored squares. So right now you can see the gray square that's being stretched out to fill the whole browser. And this slideshow is going to change based on my scroll position. And of course I'm going to have tutorials showing you guys how to do this. I'll see if I could add links in the annotations so that way you can see them pop up on your screen while you're watching this video. But as I scroll, watch this. Did you see the color change to blue there? The color changes to blue, and then I keep scrolling, color changes to green. This is just a slideshow. This is a slideshow where instead of using photographs, I just use giant colored squares, or actually small colored squares that are being stretched out to fill the whole browser with the full screen slideshow feature. So that's a pretty neat way to apply the scroll position affecting a slideshow. Another way that I came up with here is I created a slideshow, this word analytics along with the symbol to the left of it. That is a slideshow there that's pinned to the top of the browser. As I scroll, you can see that that's pinned to the top. And as I reach a different position, it changes. That's just a slideshow that's automatically changing from one slide to the next based on my scroll position. I also created a box to cover up that text and have it fade out, so that's a separate piece. But I've got a slideshow here that's just responding to my scroll position. That's another cool application of the same exact thing that you guys saw here. I just did it using a pinned slideshow at the top of the page there. So that's the first part. And if we go into Muse, you could see that they've actually broken scroll effects into actual parts. So there's the regular scroll motion that we had before, and now we have opacity, which I haven't shown you guys yet, but I did skip one and I went over this one. The slideshow is the third button where you can decide how far you scroll for a slide to change. And I think I did something like 1,000 pixels for my example there. But again, I'll show you guys in detail how this works. But then we also have opacity. Opacity is a really neat one because now you can scroll, and as you scroll, something can fade in. See that? See how that faded in there? And then I keep scrolling. Things are fading in. So they're not appearing instantly. They're fading in slowly, which I have control over. I get my key position where I can adjust how soon or how late or how quickly or how slowly the fading takes place when I have an opacity change like that. And what's cool and unique about opacity is they don't just give us a key position. This time we have a key position, but we also choose when it starts to fade in, and then when it reaches the key position, what is the opacity at that moment, and then when or how long until it fades back out again if we'd like it to fade back out again. So unlike scroll motion, where the motion just has the first part and the second part, now we actually have what's the opacity before it reaches the key position, what's the opacity at the key position, and what's the opacity after the key position. We get a three-prong control there, and I'll show you guys that in detail in another tutorial. And then the last part of what they gave us, and I'll show you over here in Muse, the last part of our 4 buttons here is to control when an Adobe Edge animation will actually begin playing. So if you guys use Adobe Edge Animate and you drop in little animations, now we can have those animations animate when we reach a certain point. So you can see here if I scroll up, I've got these circles, and then that one animated, and then that one animated. They did not all happen at the same time, but they are all the same animation. I dropped the same thing in there 3 times, and then I used my scroll effects to decide where each one would be animating. And I'll show you guys that in greater detail in a future tutorial as well. And then the very last really cool thing that I want to talk about is the library, not the widgets library. We've got this new library. They're referring to it as the persistent library. A lot of what you'll read will talk about the persistent library. And what they mean by that is that if I create something, let's say I create a little box here and I make it red around the stroke and then I make it orange on the inside. If I really love this, and I want to use this over and over again on all kinds of different websites, and maybe I even want it to be wide and skinny like that, I can take this and I can hit this little sticky note over here to add that to a persistent library. I can call it orange line, and this will now show up in Muse no matter what I'm working on, no matter what project I'm working on. I've got this orange line to work with where I can drop it onto another website, onto another page on the same website, but it'll always be here. It'll always be over here on my library panel. And what I've done, because I feel like you guys are going to be using this a lot, I know I'm going to be using it a lot. I'm not sure if you guys have checked out museresources.com yet, but I created finally a web page where I can share things with you guys to download. And on here, I've created this new mulibs section because these files are .mulib files. It stands for Muse Library. So now there are things that you can download. I've created some forms for you guys. All this stuff is free. You can go and download it, and you can follow along with some of these tutorials using these things here. And I'll just show you as an example. I'll download this one right here. Little form. It's going to jump into my downloads folder. It's got a little folder with a thank you in it from me, and then if you double click on the mulib file, it jumps right into your Muse library, and then you can drop it onto a web page. It is that fast, it is that easy. There are no smoke and mirrors here. I just did that using every bit the number of steps that you guys will be using, and it was not very many. So hopefully you guys take advantage of that. I really think you'll love it. I love it, and it just helps us get our work done faster, and that's what this is all about. So cool. I've got more tutorials coming soon. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be outlining in detail how each one of these new features is used, along with some cool tips and tricks that I've put together on combining these things and just making some cool effects, just like I've always done for you guys. So if you like it, again, please subscribe, and I've got more coming soon.